Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I can't see the rest of the room this side, but I'm going to ask that we be quite engaged in the panel discussion. I think the organizers have arranged it to be a panel, so it's a little bit more interactive. So I'm going to ask that you guys give us some of your questions and give us some of your insights just around the topic of aligning leadership and culture for a digital future. And I think the previous speakers were very gloves off. So they've really opened the crawl for us to kind of go in and herd in either our own cattle or pick our own bulls. So let's have fun with this conversation. I think it's an integral conversation in the landscape of South Africa and Africa as a whole. But before we kick off, I'd like each of our panelists to please introduce themselves. I'm going to kick off right at the end. Sam, hi.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sam Mohatle. I'm looking after digital banking for FNB Lesotho. It's an exciting day today to be here with you. We've already learned a lot from this morning. I mean, the previous presentations were dumbfounding, and thanks to that.
Thanks, Sam. Louis? Jacques, sorry.
Cool. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, actually. It's fantastic to be here. Thank you for the invite and for the opportunity to come share some views. I'm currently with Old Mutual, so specifically in the team that's currently building the digital bank for Old Mutual, and I'm responsible for the SME proposition as well as the personal financial management capability. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. Louis Carstens here. I'm a partner with Partners in Performance. I work in our financial services practice. I've been with Partners in Performance for about 2.5 years now. Before that, I worked in industry, so not only consulting experience, and my industry experience pan-Africa. I worked and lived in a bunch of countries in Africa trying to get on the ground understanding a bunch of things we heard this morning about customer experience and designing for customers outside in and not inside out. Looking forward to the conversation, and that's me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, can we get an applause for our panel? Just to get the notes off. Thank you. Awesome. Louis, because you've already touched on your vast industry experience, how do you think companies can disrupt the legacy business models for a successful digital future?
So I get the first difficult question, right? It's a really, it's the eternal question, what comes first? I think there's an old saying that I've learned, which is what got you to this point in time ain't enough to get you into the future. And I think that level of adaptability and flexibility to understand the principle of constant renewal at a practical level, that's important. Design is critical for organizational success. The business model is critical. But I think we often fall into the trap of designing in silos. So we design the business model, we design the operating model, we figure out how these things tie back to strategy, but it's all actually one integrated whole. I don't believe it works sustainably if you design within silos, not in my experience in any case. The other thing that is important is when you disrupt, you've got to understand what you are disrupting and why. And you have to make sure that everybody in the organization understand that principle. I don't think it's that effective if the CEO or the C-suite says, we're going to disrupt, right? Because it can easily be just one of those hobbies of people, right? You want to disrupt, make sure people understand why, what the benefits are, and very importantly, what we need to change to disrupt. My accountability, what does good look like? When we disrupt, how do we know we have disrupted? Last point, disrupt at scale and disrupt at pace. It can't take 6 years to make a decision to disrupt, right? Disrupt, do it quickly, execute at pace.
Thanks, Louis. Jacques, do you think we are over-strategized when it comes to disruption? Are we always planning to disrupt and not actually disrupting?
I think that's a very good way of putting it, because it's so exciting and invigorating to be part of the strategy journey, where you need to get everybody's buy-in. You create this fantastic Excel model to show people the amount of money you're going to make. And I remember really well, I was presenting to one of the senior leaders in the business, and he said, you know, more fiction's been written in Excel than in a book. And that's so true, hey? So the strategy phase has a definite important role of conveying the message, getting everybody excited about what we're trying to chase, but it very quickly needs to transition then into progress as the goal. The problem is with a lot of us feeling very passionate about what we do, coming from environments where you are seen you have to be some sort of expert, you try and focus too hard on the perfection side of it, right? And I think I myself struggled with that at some stage. And we within our teams as this mantra that every week when we've got a broad check-in, everybody's like, remember, progress is the goal, progress is the goal. So it's not about exactly how right you got it, but how much were you able to get done and actually test and play around with. So I'm giving you quite a lengthy answer, but I do think there's a fine balance. Strategy absolutely has its place. Strategy is the way to get the people excited about where we're going. It gets people excited about the why and the purpose. But after that, you very quickly transition into cascading that down into work streams where people are very strongly aligned and know what they need to deliver.
Thanks, Jacques. Sam, your organization is viewed as very progressive, very young. Is this a holistic Africa view, or is this in the more advanced markets? How have you found the balance of disruption, particularly in your market?
Thanks for that. The truth of the matter is I have a privilege of knowing what it looks like in the bigger market as well as in the smaller market. And in this sense, I'm talking about the case of FNB Lesotho. You'd be surprised that the market dynamics here would be different from when you cross the border, you know, and it comes from little things like how mature is the market, say for mobile money, for instance. If you recall, back in the days, I think mobile money tried to take off in SA, but it failed. But I think it's starting to pick up now when we see the likes of Momo, what they are doing, you know. But you cross the border and then you see what the M-Pesas and the likes are doing, and then it starts like, but FNB is also operating there. What is different in that market that is not happening in this market? And I'll tell you one thing, is because the banking maturity in SA is way higher than in most of the subs where we are operating. And that means everything you do there would be different, the dynamics are different, the culture is different, even the habits are different, you know. Thanks.
Louis?
I just want to support what Jacques said about measuring progress. I think there's a trade-off. You know, some people can say, let's wait and measure once we have the perfect solution designed, right? And I think there's a logic for that. At a practical level, I think it's far more important to measure progress as progress occurs. So, you know, as consultants, we often will give clients an end-of-hour answer or end-of-day answer. Not a perfect answer, but it's better than what it was this morning. We know more at the end of the day than what we knew this morning. And when you disrupt and you change cultures and it's new leadership styles, as Jacques said, cascade it down the organization, right? But then make sure that the people you cascade it to understand exactly what their role is in driving the change. They must know what the KPIs are, and they need to know when I will get measured, what will I get measured on, what's the frequency of that, how do I get incentivized? We heard that this morning. You know, people talking about positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. What do I get incentivized on? And you know, what's my obligation here? What am I supposed to do? And you know, if you don't know that, all these other processes won't work.
Thanks. I think that's a brilliant segue sort of into my next question, which is around the cultural barriers that exist, right? And how they can be changed and addressed. Sam mentioned the vast differences between the maturity of markets between SA and Lesotho, but that also speaks to the maturity of those employed to implement strategies and to measure those strategies across different markets. So what do you think, Jacques, are the barriers that impact the strategy from a cultural perspective? And what do you think we need to do to break those barriers?
Thank you. Yeah, this is, I must say, this is a tough one, hey? Considering our journey, building from scratch, you've got a very multidisciplined team. There are lots of regulations to be considered in the process, and just the ticket to the game in banking is already a significant amount of work. So what we tried to do in this journey was try and find a balance between the amount of pressure people are under, the expertise they bring to the table, and how we jointly execute. So what our executive team did in the beginning is we had a very broad consultation around what do we believe our values are? And it's not like the typical corporate values, you put it up against the wall and it sort of stands there and we kumbaya around it every Monday and then we move on. We really spoke about a culture and values that were executable around how are we holding each other to account. The expectation was that if anyone breaks any of our values, you are going to be on the spot for it. Not because we want to isolate you and show you you're doing a bad job, but that's what the culture ultimately needs in an environment like ours, is that people, irrespective of levels, hold each other to account. If a commitment was made, a commitment was followed through. If it was not followed through at a broad forum, it should be okay to call out somebody not doing what they were supposed to do, right? So it flips the culture, conversations, and specifically lots of people come from corporates with almost like corporate PTSD. You are so scared to take the step or wandering around, am I doing the right thing, am I doing the wrong thing? Our leadership teams spent so much time with each of the leaders in their teams to say, guys, how do we actually make this real? And they really lived it. It's always a hit and a miss, right? So some people feel like it works really well. Other people will say, yeah, maybe for me it's maybe not my style, and that's also okay, because for some people it's not the style that works for them, and then maybe it's an environment that doesn't work for them. The component of psychological safety that we've all heard of post-COVID is absolutely the foundation of this, right? If you can't get that in place, you can't build a culture on top of it. So there's two streams. There's this informing or ensuring psychological safety is in place. People feel like they are safe and protected. And then the layer on top of it is we keep on challenge because we want to iteratively progress. So if commitments are missed, people are always invited to, if you have a deliverable, like for example, I've got a few prototypes at this stage, the request is to very quickly share it with senior management for feedback. And the feedback's not harsh. The feedback is like, this is great, I don't understand this maybe needs a bit of work. The leaders really gets their hands dirty in giving feedback as well, which should become natural in the business. Right? So for me, that's the way to get things going. Get out of the starting blocks and make sure the right people hold each other to account, the dependencies are traced and matched, and you actually start seeing things coming out on the other side.
And to add more to that, I think it also, so the executive also plays a big role, you know. He spoke about fear of not being able to commit, holding each other accountable and all that, you know. Normally when the juniors see the executive leadership, you know, taking very kindly to this thing of technology and innovation, it's very easy to cascade down, you know, to make sure that even the person at the bottom of that hierarchy is also following suit, because then when you start seeing what the seniors are doing, then it's easy for you to actually say, I should be doing that. I'm saying this because I remember when we started the journey of digital transformation, I think we started being aggressive, well, in the Lesotho context, of course. I think we started in 2016. And when we started with it, 2 years down the line, I would be checking with other executives to say, hey, do you know that you can do this and that on the app? And they would be surprised. So it says when there is no enough level of buy-in at that level, it gets even more difficult to cascade it downstairs. Thanks.
I love that because I know I'm an advocate of, do you know you could do this? My question will also flip slightly for all three of you gentlemen. We're talking about breaking down cultural barriers in the organization. We then also have cultural barriers that exist with our clients, with our customers. How does the organization then ensure that the clients are not the ones that are causing us not to move forward? Because moving forward is required. Progress is an imperative. How do we ensure that we bring our clients along on the journey? And I think earlier, a speaker before mentioned the fact that it's not technology, it's not clients that need to catch up to technology, but rather technology that needs to catch up to clients. So how do we ensure that in a variable market where you have a majority of people who earn below the minimum wage, but are still wanting to be banked? In other countries, we've got M-Pesa, we've recently introduced PayShop. How do we bring clients along for the journey to break down cultural barriers? Louis, I'm going to give it to you first.
So it's probably the one theme across all the speakers this morning was around customers. You know, businesses or banks are very complex. We expect customers, that one of the speakers said that, we expect customers to adapt to us. It should be the other way around. I don't think it's that difficult to do this. We're all aware of a CVP. We have marketing teams in banks who are very good at designing CVPs. They can tell you what the product is. They can do your volume and your value calculations. They've got launch plans. They've got work streams to manage that, to execute on that. And I've seen that in many banks that I also personally worked in. To answer your question, for me, is about what I've done, is walking the streets. I was working in a bank in a particular country, and we wanted to create a wealth cluster out of the higher income clusters. And the internal team did the calculations, designed the CVP, and there was really a good benefits case for that. Then we traveled with the marketing team and the CVP team to the country where we wanted to go and test that. Now, we didn't test that the way normally you would do it, is by running focus groups to then validate or invalidate your CVP. We actually walked the streets in a particular city in a country in Africa. And not just walking the street and asking, you know, unstructured questions. We would go and stand in front of the branch of a competitor with people walking out of that branch, and we had 3 or 4 or 5 questions that we asked. And that led us in the end to a fundamental rethink of the CVP for the wealth cluster. Had we not do that, I think we would have gone to market with a CVP that looked good in theory, but practically on the ground, it didn't work. It wouldn't have worked. So for me, do your design within the organization. The validation, go and walk the streets. Literally, physically walk the streets and talk to customers. Existing customers, non-customers, and competitor customers. That's how I would do it.
Thanks, Louis. Jacques?
Thanks, Louis. I fully agree with that. You need to spend lots of time in the field. Quite a few years back, I spent time in inclusive banking. And it was led by a gentleman named Koen Jonker, who's now the CEO of Time Bank. And he, every week, would ask his team, who of you spent time in the field this week? And very few would. And ended up spending time in Tembisa and how people live their lives. It really gives you context of the customer you're serving. Lots of us sitting here don't represent the customers we're serving. We need to get closer to them. That's absolutely critical. So from our perspective, we've spent quite a lot of time doing research and understanding what our archetypes would be from a customer perspective, and been quite clear around where do we think the sweet spot is. So being a pure digital bank already means certain people might exclude themselves from the process. They might say, I need a little bit more, maybe this is not for me. And at this point we're saying, and that's okay for now, let's see where the real sweet spot is. So we're doing a significant amount of customer testing where our teams, as they iterate prototypes, we bring customers in across our archetypes. We share what we see with them in a way of making sure we're constantly aligned to our customers. Where we start seeing trends where there's resistance, we'd always unpack that to understand what the driver is. So to your comment earlier around, do customers sometimes hold you back? I think it's very important to always know that customers do different things than what they say, number one. I think this is a learning that all of us have. And number two, it also is very dependent that day on their context, where their personal financial situation was on that day, and you need to get as many data points as possible to actually accurately triangulate where this person's at. Lots of the things we're testing, as soon as you put a prototype in someone's hand, there is a level of anxiety, because most people in South Africa, if they think about their finances, it's not a happy thought. It's one of anxiety. It's one of, I'm again not going to make it, I'm failing again. So the empathy in that process is so critical, and then getting people excited about the options of what does help mean? How can help show up for you? So I'm double-clicking a little bit on the customer side, but super passionate about it. Being customer-led is the only way to go, but your customers you need to understand that your customer is not always right. You need context around why they make certain decisions. You also another question, sorry, around the internal bureaucracy.
Yes, and how that impacts how you become client-led. Sometimes you'll find organizations say they are client-led, but when it comes to decision-making, it's not client-led, it's bottom-line-led. So how do we change that cultural barrier?
I think it's been super useful to bring the voice of the customer into lots of meetings, right? Even up to board level. Whenever there's updates on what's happening, the voice of the customer is there. And it gets people excited about the fact that real people are excited about this thing you're going to put in the market, and it's going to do something for them, and there's an emotion that gets attached to that. So I think what we do is we almost over-communicate in terms of where our customers are. And we found that incredibly useful. Obviously, some of the things are new to traditional bankers. So traditional bankers would default to traditional processes like lots of us do. We very quickly go back to what's known. This customer infusion processes are very good to break some of those thoughts down, to say, oh, customers actually think like this. I really need to change a little bit. So we've put in quite a bit of effort in that.
Thanks, Jacques. Sam?
Yeah.
What role do you think your organization can play in helping to foster this kind of conversation, bringing the voice of the customer to the fore, having led digital transformation quite heavily?
So I think it was the second speaker, he spoke to customer centricity. If you listen to Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, he also speaks of customer centricity. That means the entire Amazon model is built on customer centricity. And what does that mean? Give the customer what they need, and then they will have a reason to stick with you. It's as simple as that. So now, if we design products that speak to the needs of the customer, then it's a guarantee that they're definitely going to use that, whether there's technology involved or not. As long as you address their needs, they'll find a way to break that barrier and have access to that they need most.
Okay. Is the rest of the room still with us? Are they answering the questions you've been asking yourself all morning? If they're not, please put up your hand. I'll get them to answer them. Gents, what changes do we think are absolutely necessary and organization agnostic? Thinking about the customer, what changes do we think are necessary in order for the culture and working methods to support digital transformation? Jacques?
I think there's a few things that obviously from a skills perspective, one needs to have and access to the right skills. So that's one of the components that's been highlighted in the list before, and there's definitely some skills gaps there. But I think the more important thing for me, and the way I've unpacked some of the decisions I've recently made, was a very deep understanding of commercially what you're busy with, what does that mean to the business and to the customer. as soon as you, and you don't have to be an accountant or a financial modeler, if you just trace some of the steps of what you're doing and you start pulling the blocks together, you realize there's efficiencies that can be reached at both ends, right? So I think ultimately digital transformation talks to making the customer happy, giving them stuff that they need that delivers value to them, while you're delivering value to the organization as well. So for me, one of the key things I would highlight more and more and more, and it shouldn't be a finance conversation, it should be the commercial realities of what we're building are as follows. Certain decisions were made and we're executing as follows. This is how it stacks up. With that information, would it change what you guys do today? So for example, I had a conversation with the UI UX team recently, and we had a conversation around how expensive it would be to embed certain materials in the app, especially if it's zero rated. Are we going to keep on embedding lots of videos over and over and over, or should some of them maybe be infographics, for example? The UI UX team is not typically where you find people that are commercially inclined, but some of the decisions they make can have an implication on your cost line. So I may be giving a bit of a strange answer, but for me, the understanding of that reality makes sure there's alignment on both ends, and somebody wearing it from a customer perspective, somebody wearing it from an internal perspective, and the focus on generating value. Thanks.
Thanks, Jacques. Sam, what changes do you think we need? Having had the view of Lesotho versus South Africa as an example, where do you think, as South Africa is considered a more mature market, are we actually lacking, especially in bringing along the customer that earns below minimum wage or minimum wage?
So, in my view, simplicity is key. Even when it comes to UX experience, as long as you keep your interfaces, your platforms as simple as possible. They can be as complex as they can be in the back end, but as long as it's simple, user-friendly, and easy to use, I can assure you, you can reach even those, because it's one thing to invest in one platform that is very complex, and at the end of the day, it's going to be just one white elephant that customers are not going to use. But at the end of the day, the reason why we design these things is to make life easier and not the other way around. So in my view, keeping it simple is the key.
Louis, so we've had a bit of a conversation around disruption. The biggest disruptor that sort of hit us all in the face happened 3 years ago. For me, it was my daughter. She was born 3 years ago. But then, next thing I knew, there was COVID. So COVID shifted much of the way we consider digital. It shifted the way we work. It shifted a lot of the culture in organizations. But there are still organizations that want to go back to 2019, which is testament to certain ways in which we work and we build products. We do have either organizations or people in organizations that also sort of stand in the way of progress. How do we drive that conversation, and how do we help organizations move beyond and accept that whether or not you come along the journey, we need to move?
Well, if you think about your house, let's say you've got some problems with your electrical wiring at your house. So you get an electrician to come out. Every week there's an electrician, and he sends you a bill, and he fixes this wire, and then that wire, and another wire. But the entire system doesn't make any progress. So it's a principle that we call, you need to wire your organization. Part of wiring means that, and you said it, Jacques, you spoke about alignment. Without alignment, you cannot implement transformation. But how do you get to alignment? I think there's a lot of change overload. I think there's transformation overload in businesses. There's forever some new journey that banks are on, and they haven't finished the previous journey, and then they jump on a new journey. And as part of this, you just create confusion within a business. Sam spoke about simplifying things. I agree with that. But part of simplification doesn't mean that there's just speed to comply. There's got to be speed to truth. Speed to truth is, go back and speak to your customers, do your focus groups, make sure you've got alignment internally. If people don't know their exact role within a transformation, you're not going to get alignment. You're just not. So you can have the best designed communication plans internally, but if the branch manager looks at that and he or she doesn't understand exactly what do I need to do today, or what does great look like, what does good look like in my life as a branch manager in this particular region tomorrow, if that level of absolute clarity is not there, you're going to struggle. And then you will see people who want to go back to 2019. Because in 2019, there was predictability maybe. I knew what I was going to do and what I'm being accountable for and how I get measured. Now we have this big disruptor. We're on a transformation journey. And I don't know if my KPIs have changed. So similar to when you get to a point in your house where you say, I'm not going to call the electrician anymore, right? Because the electrician coming out once a week is fixing a symptom. I now need to rewire my entire house. The same is true for organizations. Sometimes you need to rewire the organization. Start with the strategy. Does everybody understand the strategy? Is it clear? Do they know what the strategy is supposed to deliver? How do we better service customers? And then implications for me personally. That's the unit of analysis. What's the implications for me personally? That's how you rewire the organization. That's how I get alignment and ownership and buy into a change process.
Thank you. So I heard ownership is key in being able to drive disruption and transformation. I need to own that disruption and I need to own that transformation. Now, Sam, how do we support this? So we've now said, take ownership. We've now said the disruption is yours, the transformation is yours. How do we support it in the real world, not just on paper?
Yeah, I like that. Louis and Jacques spoke about one thing in common, which is hearing what the customer says out there in the street. I, for one, am an advocate of such. So we have introduced a channel in Lesotho, we call it Cash Plus. And this channel is the one that we are using as the go-to-market strategy to address financial inclusion in our market. It has just been launched in SA. I'm sure you'll start seeing more of it as well going forward. But what we did with this channel is, at first we used to try and run it from the office, hoping that it will just run itself out there. But I, for one, had to go out there to the deepest rurals of Lesotho to get that thing there and see it working. And when you start seeing the value it adds to those little communities that don't even have an ATM, then you'd start saying, wow, so this thing is quite a mammoth solution, you know. So we need to get out of our comfort zones and make sure that we go to the core of where this thing is needed. Then we can be able to customize it and fine-tune it as time goes on, such that it becomes the best solution ever. Meaning, get out of a comfort zone, go and meet the customer. Then you'll be able to address their needs better.
Okay, so what I heard was ownership is key in the disruption and transformation, but I mustn't be precious about what I've designed because it will change according to what the client needs. Okay, great. You spoke about skills development, Jacques, a little earlier. With the South African literacy rate as a key point where we are, in terms of access to Wi-Fi, data, technology, and I say advanced technology in the sense that a majority have access to a Huawei Wi-Fi as opposed to a Samsung S20. How do we bridge that knowledge gap? I don't want to call it a skills gap because in order to bring our clients and customers along for the journey, they need to understand what we're bringing to them. How do we bridge that knowledge gap to make sure that our customers know what we're wanting for them to know and be able to do and what the technology is doing for them? How do we make sure that the branch manager, like Louis mentioned, knows what it is that they need to do? What are those opportunities and what's there for us to implement going forward?
I I think that's the hard part, right? It's always, I remember in the early days of inclusive banking, cell phone coverage would be an issue. And we had agents in the field who would sell funeral plans and open accounts. And obviously the bulk of the team's completely oblivious to it. The commission earning agent, for him, that's his bread and butter, literally every day. So being very close to our customers, and as I've mentioned, we run lots of tests with our customers. You start to pick up themes where there's uncertainty, potential unfamiliarity. There are these themes starting to pop up that you can address. And I think what's required now is more around how do we take some of the intimidation away. So the way we speak to you is not like a typical bank would. But interestingly enough, if it's too informal, people don't trust it. So there's a fine balance there to say, I am still a bank, but I'm engaging with you very differently, and being there step by step in the journey. So the way you can use personalization, hyper-personalization actually, all the tools you've got at this stage by making customers aware of certain information at the right time is critical. So context in data, knowing what the customer either tried to do or is doing, is it a good pattern for them or not? Should we potentially intervene? That's, if you're customer-centric, you sometimes have to admit that you're going to disrupt yourself and actually take some of your revenue away for the sake of the customer. You have to say, if you are excessively using cash, we can't help you budget, for example, unless you tell us what you use the cash for example, right? Being very honest, and this is not only transparent, it's honest about there's an exchange. What does this exchange mean? And taking it to a level where they understand. I think it's the same from an internal perspective as well. People come with very specific skill sets sometimes, but the knowledge to apply it in a specific environment is different, right? So in the environment we're working in, we've got a very wide range of people. We've got the grys ou oomie, the lady who's been in banking forever, who worked in the guts of the call center, and then she ended up in ops. And those people are magic, right? Because they've seen where things fall apart. But if you say, okay, guys, now with that experience, if we completely reimagine this, how do we do that? So that's where, from an internal perspective, the aspiration always needs to be so clear in terms of why we're here and what are we trying to deliver. I hope that answers your question.
It does. I do have an addition, and maybe Sam can help me here. Do you think we are over builders, over coders? Do we have an app for everything? Should we be talking super app, one app? Should we be like China with just WeChat? Should we be like the UAE? How do you think we can bring this progress? Because clients are also overwhelmed with the 75,000 different apps that do one thing. A speaker earlier spoke about it, that all of these 75,000 apps then again have different digital IDs. So now I'm overwhelmed by having to remember the username and password. And I'd like to say I'm very young, but I can't remember that many usernames and passwords. How do we bring the client along for this journey?
Unfortunately, in this journey, there's no one size fits all. And the reason why we have so many apps is because if you look at innovation, in fact, from the context of digital disruption, everybody out there is finding a way to make things even simpler and more accessible to everybody, and even in a cheaper way. That is, whatever that used to be accessible to only the elite, maybe a decade or so back, now it's been accessible to everybody, even at the bottom of the pyramid. And that means for as long as there's a hunger, there's a strive to get things even better, to do things even more differently and efficiently, we'll continue to see the surge in terms of the growth of those apps. But then there will always be one thing in common. At some point, they are going to converge. We have developers out there who are dedicated to building APIs, and some of these APIs, they are common, one way or the other. So that means at the end of the day, we would not be talking about the app itself, but because there's an API at the back then you'll start seeing those starting to communicate depending on what this one has that this one does not have. That means that API model is also key. And it is the one that is going to help bring all those 75,000 apps together as long as there's something in common that they have.
Louis, you've worked with various banks across different markets. Do you think PayShap is a great example of one platform or solution that has now been implemented, I think, by the Big Four, Big Five at this point? Do you think, to Sam's point, we're still going to see a surge, or are we going to see, or is there an opportunity to see more convergence, more thinking for the client, more than thinking for the solution?
I'm very fortunate to know Modus Pretorius from PASA very well. And I remember at the time when we were talking about all these apps and these new developments, Modus has always been of the opinion that you need both, right? There will always be convergence, but there will always be the principle of adoption of what we have. And I think that's part of what Sam said. It's a journey. So, you know, this is what we have today, PayShap. It's better than what we had. It will evolve. It will become better, it will become more granular, there will be higher levels of adoption, but there will be convergence into other parts of choices consumers make and customers make, business-to-business customers make, in order to drive their own commercial objectives.
The technical capability that exists currently in Africa is quite vast. Just this morning I was looking at a post on LinkedIn where someone was saying, want to become a data analyst, and had listed probably about 8 or so links where you can learn to be a data analyst. One of the things that you had to learn to use quite efficiently is Excel. So obviously I'd never be a data analyst. Where I'm wanting to go is the platforms to teach, the platforms to learn, the platforms to consume the information are requiring data and Wi-Fi and access to devices. How are organizations playing a part in driving accessibility to those platforms? We've seen internet cafes are dying a very quick and hard and fast death. So where do people access this information if they don't have access to data, but they have a phone, or they don't have a phone, but they have access to data? Sam?
Yeah, Jacques mentioned something that is quite interesting, and I think it speaks to your question right now. At some point as an organization, you should be willing to spend some in order to get your customer to start using, you know. So in the context of Lesotho, we have our FNB app whitelisted. That is, we have allowed our customers to use it without being charged any data. And that is the price we pay for them to adapt and stick onto that, because the value we get of them transacting there and the security and all of the features that we have built onto that app, to us, it counts a lot more than what we are spending for them to be able to access that app for free. So you have to be able to, you have to be willing to pay some for your customers to be able to enjoy that.
Jacques, you also touched on that, where when you're building your app and you're thinking about all the videos, the how-to guides, is it an infographic? What of language? We have, in this country alone, 11 official languages. In Nigeria, I believe there's even more. What of language, and at which point do we begin to converge from a technology perspective with the language of the client?
I think that's a very good question, and one with quite a complicated answer. So we're in the fortunate position to work quite close to our customer experience team, and we've done quite a few tests over the last few months, not years yet, but months. And we still don't have the right answer, but what's been interesting is we had a few options where we had just the vernacular versions of the app, for example, and then we had versions where there was a mix of English and vernacular. It's interesting how people want to see certain words that speaks to the legitimacy of the offering which are most likely in English, and then the opportunity to weave in potentially some other pieces of the language in there. Now, the problem with that is people might think you are almost bastardizing their language, which you're not doing. You're trying to find a new way of communicating to the customer. So I don't have the right answer here yet. We're on a journey. I don't think having 11 versions of your app would be the right answer. There's going to be a mix in there. But the way customers have also been trained very well by the market over the last decades, right? So if the expectation's there that a bank shows up as X and this one doesn't, it actually does more harm. So there's a fine balance there, and that's what we're going to try and do to resolve that.
Thanks for that. It'd be very interesting. I'd hoped one of the banks that has Vernac would have been on the panel at their ATMs, because it would be very interesting to see how that sort of first window into technology, which was the ATM, translates then into their apps and into their technological ecosystem. Louis, in your travels, what opportunities have been presented by digital transformation and the digital disruption? Having understood the technical skills that we are needing to develop, having understood the strategies that we're needing to develop, and the cultural barriers that we need to overcome, what opportunities do you think exist in helping this journey flourish?
From a customer perspective, for me, it is money management. About 2 to 3 years ago, I did a research piece. And I wanted to understand the role of money in the household. That was the question. So we went to a bunch of market research firms, and they gave us really good proposals. But in the end, I used students from Cedar University. I had access to about 10,000 students. We trained them, and we asked them, go to your household, and here's a questionnaire with 5 questions, and it's all about what is the role of money in this household? And it comes back to a point that Jacques made, is that often we try and understand customer expectations from our perspective. So I think digital processes, digital money, digital fulfillment, speed, of course. So there's the ability to satisfy customer needs fast. I think that's a big opportunity. An earlier speaker said, thinking that digitizing processes is a ticket to the game. It's not. You just have to do it. And she said you've got to do it very, very fast. So I think customer loyalty, all these things that banks want, primacy, digital for me is a big part of that. So the fulfillment, the speed at which you fulfill, money management within the household, lower levels of indebtedness. I think those are just 3 of the opportunities that I see, that if we get digital transformation right, the impact on customers will be immense, in a positive sense.
Jacques, you agree?
Yeah, definitely. I think the layer on top of this that digital does is it starts thinking about what proactive would mean. For me, one of the key things I'm hoping we can get right, because we're a greenfields build, unrestrained from certain legacy issues. Our data should be at a level where the processing of it is superior, close to real time. And that's so critical, as mentioned in the Discovery presentation this morning as well. Customers, as soon as you give customers the tools to say, these are the things I think you need to manage, and as you've mentioned on your tours as well, you get an insight into how people feel about their finances and what they want to change. You then need to take the responsibility to say, how can we proactively help you? Not after the fact, 2 days later say, okay, cool, you've overspent. No, now. You need to know now. Because for those people, literally, it could be in certain instances a decision whether they eat or not that night. It's very real, and I think that comes with a responsibility. If you create an expectation, you have to fill it.
Sam, an earlier speaker spoke about neobanks and the balance that is needed, because it's not a zero-sum game, right? there's a balance that's required from a money management perspective. The opportunities are really around bringing the client forward to make them a better saving, have a better saving behavior, have a better spend behavior. How do we enable that within the digital transformation space?
I liked what Chipo said about digitizing your processes. It's no longer a nice to have. It's something that you must do and must do it quick. Because as you do that, you are also bound to embed some element of robotics in your processes in the back. We spoke about AI and machine learning. You know, talk about the millennials, for instance. They need everything to be done and quickly. Millennials are not your kind that would walk into the branch and want to stay there for the whole day. If they can open that bank account online or on their app, then they will opt for that. That means the speed of doing things is the catalyst behind how successful we are in this digital transformation in terms of aligning the culture, in terms of aligning the strategy of the organization with its digital strategy. So we need to make sure that the digital strategy is aligned to that of the broader organization. Then we can start seeing that shift in culture, which we anticipate to see, of which if our employees, if our team is well versed enough in terms of digital transformation and they are well equipped and then we have addressed those skills gaps that we have, then you are sure to have an organization that is ready to transform digitally and for a sustainable future for that matter.
Thanks. Jacques, you spoke about how what you're building is opportune in the sense that you don't have legacy issues. You are starting from 0 and you're going to 100. You're building a Ferrari. Now, how do I, as a client, benefit from that? So we've spoken about super apps. We've spoken about opportunities of single digital IDs. How do I, as a client, benefit from what you're building? So previously, the more traditional banks, you guys would give me a share certificate. What are the opportunities that exist when building from scratch for me as a client?
I think it's a very multifaceted question. I think the one thing I want to start off with, because all of us sitting here have been at various versions of incumbent banks. The reason why there's opportunities for banks like us in the market is not because the other banks aren't trying, right? They know what the right things are to do. We are all on very similar trains of thought in terms of where the pressure points are. Trying to do a transformation project is incredibly disruptive and expensive. So core banking transformation journeys, Standard Bank tried one in the 2010s. They spent a significant amount of money. They have made some inroads in the business, but it is incredibly complicated. Technology's moved on significantly, right? So from a way you engineer and architect the solution, the providers you use, software as a service, if bulk of your providers are software as a service, trying to get the cost base down to a level where you've got lots of flexibility in terms of how you charge, and 2, speed in terms of performance of what the customers actually experience with engaging with that bank. So from a cost perspective, modern technology is at a level where it's still expensive to build a bank, but the running costs are significantly lower. You can pass that on to the customer, right? So we're hoping to see that certain fees that are typically charged, we might not charge, for example, right? So there needs to be a financial benefit to the customer. The other benefit to the customer needs to be that data is ingrained in everything that's done. So the expectation needs to be that we engage you with rich content that's contextual. But there's a proviso to that we need to know more about you. So if we ask you questions along the way, that information exchange game, it's to your benefit, right? So there's a fine balance there, but we're hoping to take the experience to a next level where it's about really having a very deep understanding of the customer, making sure you price it at a level where it's fair, the customer also feels it's fair, not only transparent, but fair, and the way you engage with them is just so fundamentally different, and it's fully ingrained everything you try and do is sitting in one app. It's not standalone features where, here I go for education, here I do my personal financial management. If you string these journeys together, they become very rich. So that's some of the key things we're hoping to deliver to our customers. And also then ultimately, because we're part of a broader group, it also means you can take integrated financial services to a next level, where you can really put propositions together to really create maximum value for customers out of a bundle of products. Yeah, so I'm rather gonna stop there, but yeah.
Louis, do you agree?
I fully agree. I would just add one point, which is, you know, I agree with the principle of all the journeys and the richness of the journeys. I would just argue that to get real value out of those is make sure that you execute and you implement, and make sure that the people who you are dependent on to deliver these journeys for the customer, make sure they understand what they're accountable for in doing that. But the execution culture is critical to get the digital transformation implemented in a way that makes a difference to the lives of customers.
Sam, do you feel that from a customer maturity perspective, the journey that specifically your organization started as a digital disruptor, you've been able to bring your clients along, or have you lost any along the way?
I was asked this question back in 2017 in one conference, and one of the speakers said, the pace at which you are introducing technology and the new things in the market, don't you feel like you are leaving others behind? And now I'm getting it again today, so I mean, it's quite ironic. But the short answer to that is no, we're not. And my answer I gave back then was that I think back then we had just introduced the FNB app. And before then, we were using cell phone banking on the USSD platform. And the understanding was that now with the introduction of the app, we are actually leaving others behind because they may find it that complex thing that they may not even be able to use. But I think we can agree that in the current era that we are in, people are finding it even easier to use these applications. Take the communication applications, for instance, your WhatsApps and Facebook. I mean, I was surprised not so long ago when I discovered that my father is on Facebook as well. And I was like, what's this gentleman doing on Facebook? You know. So the truth of the matter is, as we are evolving, in the past you would say yes, maybe, but I think what we are seeing in reality and what is happening on the ground, it's not necessarily so. As long as these applications that we are designing and building are responding to the customer needs, I want to assure you, they will always find a way to use them.
I love that. I like that you're not leaving anyone behind. So, gents, my question is going to be, disruption and transformation comes with its risks. Cybersecurity, Black Friday, we know everyone is getting scammed. We've introduced virtual cards to try and mitigate this. How do we ensure that in this digital disruption, we are staying safe? Sam, are your customers safe?
No comment.
Thank you. That's $1 million question, honestly. But cybersecurity, it's affecting each one of us. And the more we continue to expand in these innovations, it will remain there, you know. Just like there was some other type of threat in the past before the cyber era, it will always be there. But I think what we need to do as the financial institutions and other companies is to make sure that we are dedicated in terms of investing in proper systems that will safeguard our customers, to make sure that they feel at ease as well. It's inevitable, but we need to invest.
Jacques, do you feel that traditional banks are more risk averse when it comes to trying certain things in comparison to your bank, specifically because you have no legacy systems and the data that you know about your customers a little bit crisper?
I think it's, again, this sounds like the politician's answer, but the thing is, all of us are regulated, right? So if you get it wrong, you get a proper fine. So I don't think they're I don't think they're risk adverse. I think the risks are very, very clear. The problem is in certain instances, because of legacy issues, potential entities existing more than once, challenges with a business that's grown over years, things might slip through the cracks. So I think that's more the risk in terms of being risk adverse. I think the fortuitous side of this, being able to build from scratch, means you ingrain all of these capability at a source level. And there's best of breed providers that you bring along on the journey from the beginning. So again, it's a timing thing. Definitely not risk adverse. The regulator would make life very hard for them if they were risk adverse, but it's hard, right? In a legacy environment, there are strange things that happens. We've all worked in those banks. You expect something to be like this and it comes out like that, and then there's a whole process to figure out what happened. It's the reality of their business. And I think slowly but surely they're trying to close those gaps. But definitely not being risk adverse on it. I would actually say there's being more levels of masking that probably happens. As soon as there's a crack, there'll be another level of security that would come in. Thanks.
Thanks, Jacques. Louis, as a customer, I like convenience. I like to be able to bank at 2 in the morning when I'm out in the club, quickly transfer money from my savings to my pocket, because now I've actually spent more than I wanted. But at the same time, I want to be able, I want the security and safety net that my bank is not going to allow someone who's not me to do that. These conversations happen quite regularly and quite vastly. What is the conversation that needs to happen with the client, the customer, just around managing expectations? If you have an expectation for us to protect you, you must know we're not protecting you at 3 in the morning. I'm not saying don't, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think banks have got their risk committees, they've got their risk registers, they've got risk processes, operational risk, strategic risk, liquidity risk, customer risk, and all these kind of things. And I think there's very good processes in our banks as far as that's concerned. I think our banks are, for the most of it, very well regulated. And they should be, because we're working with the client's money. I think your question around what do you do with a customer, that's the outside-in perspective. I think there's a lot of education that's required, but also understanding exactly what their needs and expectations are around that. And it might be that there's a trade-off. I'd rather not be able to transfer money between 2 and 3 in the morning if there's a risk that my money will be compromised. And I think I would love to see that we get to the level of transparency with our customers on risk compared to what we have internally in our banks when it gets to our risk management functions. I think that's an opportunity for us.
Thanks, Jacques. Last question from me, and I'm going to ask each of you just one question. Sam, what opportunities do you think exist to integrate digital transformation and the culture of a digital future in our schools?
So I've always been an advocate of customer education. And I think even in the modern age, we are starting to see a lot of infographics, even on Facebook, on LinkedIn, or wherever, that's readily available to teach people about these things. If we can be purposeful in terms of passing the information and making it as seamless. So if you're going to teach me about something that is technology related, preferably I wouldn't want a lot of text around it. I'll probably want some infographics, the pictorial view of what this thing is doing, and it speaks to the innovation of the digital marketers there. How to best reach your customers such that the message that you are portraying, they assimilate it as quickly as possible and as seamlessly as possible without getting into a lot of jargon of what this is and what that is. Avoid jargon, keep it simple, and go straight to the point. Then I think that's an opportunity that we have there.
Thanks, Sam. Jacques, what do you think companies need to increase the speed at which they innovate?
Yeah, this is this is a hard one, right? Because it's managing the run versus building towards the new. So I think the ultimate thing that's needed is a leadership team and a board and all the decision makers that's had a very real assessment of what's likely going to happen once this project gets going. Transformation projects are disruptive in nature. It impacts the people who work there. There's going to be people who feel threatened. There are people who are going to feel that they're sidelined. It might also have an impact on your customer, and that's obviously the portion that people try to focus on first. So I would say being very honest and clear about what the objectives are that you're trying to chase, why you're chasing them, and putting it in a way that people can operationally understand this is what's likely going to happen over the next 6 weeks or 8 weeks. Or if you do a pilot, there's certain outcomes that you're looking for to say, we're happy to have these as outcomes, now we're going to push it. And as soon as you pull the trigger, you can't be half pregnant with the transformation program. You have to go through it. So my views are maybe a little bit too harsh, but unfortunately the little bit back and forth, it doesn't take you there. You have to commit. People have to be put on the spot to say, have you properly thought this through? Did you get the right advice and input? Yes, we have. Get the relevant parties aligned and move. Then you'll see more and more of these initiatives come to the table. And it's part of the culture conversation we had earlier as well, is that the people who come with the ideas will also be the ones who are scrutinized, right? They'll be asked lots of questions, but that's part of the culture then. You've put your hand up for a change, great. Let's give you a shot at it, but we won't necessarily make it easy for you. We need to make sure we're responsible. I think for me, that's one of the key things we need to get right.
Thanks, Jacques. Louis, last one. How do we ensure that when we are aligning leadership and people to the culture of digital transformation, we are ensuring that it's for long-term success? An earlier speaker spoke to how someone thought the internet is not something we need to be focusing on right now. But looking at where we are, the future is ours. But how do we ensure that our organizations and our people and our leadership are aligned?
So I think you've got to be flexible about your design principles when you design for the future. I think that's for me the first principle. I think the second one is that even as we design for a digital future, there might be some customers who don't want that digital future. So having the flexibility to have a CVP for customers who want the digital future versus those who don't want that digital future. I think that's important. Talks to an earlier point this morning about we should stop always wanting the customer to adapt to us. We need to adapt to the customer. And then the third thing is just don't over-engineer these things. Don't overthink it. Don't overcomplicate this. The principles remain the same. We have a customer. We need to satisfy the customer better than competitors, and we need to do it faster and quicker than competitors, and take people with us on the journey. Get those things right, and I think we'll have the sustainability and the stickiness.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. I think our time is up. That's very sad. Are we taking questions from the floor, or can we excuse the chance? Yay.
Thank you. I just want to know from the panel, how do you normalize the digitally artificial culture that we have? You find that you've got employees that are frustrated because of digitization. Yes, it's good. Yes, it's at speed. But they need to change some numbers. But then you've got a customer who cannot use this technology, that needs time to be taught about this technology. You get into a branch, the employee is frustrated, or the consultant, because time is money for them. There's certain numbers that they're chasing, so they are not able to help the customer. So you find that there's this disconnect or something that's happening. Is it normal? Is it okay? Is it the life that we say that we're accepting going forward? Thank you.
I'm going to direct that question first to Sam, because I know that your organization has switched off quite a lot of functions or features in branch that can be done on the app.
Yeah, so this is a rather tough one, because there's no straight answer to it. And the reason I'm saying that is because as we are evolving, those are the things that we start seeing. The feedback that you are providing is exactly what we see in our branches. And it is then that when we see that, we go back to the drawing board and say, shouldn't, so for instance, you come to branch for a statement, then I go back to the back team and say, shouldn't we offer that for free on the app? You know, you come to branch to reset your PIN. I go back to my team and say, shouldn't they be able to view their PIN rather than always changing the PIN? You know, so it's, I can't say there's a straight answer to that, but as we are evolving, we are trying to embed all of those frustrations that we see and then bring them into the app so that they do them conveniently. But as we are doing that, we are also trying to make sure that it's as seamless as possible. That simplicity that I spoke of earlier on also speaks to making it easy for the customers to ride along.
Jacques, do you want to take a stab at it from a fully digital bank that doesn't have a physical footprint?
Yeah, I think this is definitely one of the challenges that one needs to cater for. If you look at what Time Bank has done with their supporting agents in Pick n Pay stores, they play a critical role, right? And the kiosks that they have in the stores, critical role. So we haven't resolved exactly how our model would play out, but what we are designing for is to make sure that customers can get access to content that explains how certain things would work. So if you go down a budgeting journey, there'll be a video and an infographic that actually shows you this is what you're going to do and this is why it's important to you to do. So I think that level, making sure the customer, when they get to the point when they're ready to take the effort, you give them a bit of an overview, right? But those things also only go so far. You then very quickly need to show value, right? So that customers can see, okay, what I've done, it works. The complexity around real issues where people might not be able to read, then you have to cater in your back office for what's also mentioned this morning in the Discovery presentation around getting agents who can actually help customers on their own devices, right? Hopefully you get to a stage where that is minimized, because it will obviously be expensive. We need to be people-light for our model to work as well as it should. But you are going to have these areas where you're going to have to augment. So I think very long-winded way of saying you're going to have to test and learn, trial a few things, and augment with the right people at a palatable cost to support where needed.
Louis, frontline staff get really frustrated with consultants because they have a thick book of this is how you should do it, but they're not on the other side with a frustrated customer. How do we ensure that our consulting agencies and people who come in to help in the transformation of digital are also spending time on the ground with both customer and with the staff that need to implement these changes?
I think the second part of your question also provides the answer, which is the consultants to spend time on the ground with the employees, the branch staff, and the customers. And I think there's just another part also that I think is crucial, which is co-design. Just co-design, co-test, experiment. You're going to make mistakes. You know, you're going to miss deadlines. You're going to deploy a solution that's not perfect. As long as the solution is either more perfect than what it was this morning, or if it's not, that you learn from that and you can rectify that tomorrow. So the principle of experimentation, co-designing with clients and with employees, that's crucial.
Thank you very much. You answered. Thank you. There was a question on the side of the room.
Yes, thank you. My name is Andrew, and I'm with AFC Commercial Bank, coming out of Zimbabwe. Now, my question is really around defending our revenues. And when I say that, my point of departure really is we're all in business to make money. Therefore, how do we do a trade-off or balance between client privacy and the use of data analytics, AI, and things like that as we perform our business? And I'll try and paint a scenario here. It would be preferable in Sam's position, for instance, I'll use FNB. If FNB then said, okay, 2 weeks on, Andrew usually spends his Friday afternoon at, let's say, News Cafe Rivonia there. And 2 weeks on, we realize he's not swiping there, he's not using his card there. And evidently, I'd expect the bank picks up the call and say, hang on, we haven't seen you doing the usual. Are you okay? In hindsight, you're showing concern around your customer, but the real truth is you're defending your revenue around his purchase behavior. But indirectly, that also points to the fact that, look, Big Brother is watching, so I know where you are, what you do, and how you do it. So given the scenario I've painted, how do we strike a balance between client privacy and use of technologies?
Louis, I'm going to tag you first.
So, you're from Zimbabwe. I actually lived in Harare. And I think my experience is people in Zimbabwe are immensely creative at problem solving. I think it's the principle of choices and trade-offs. And I think Jacques made a point earlier that as you deploy these new solutions, make sure that your cost to serve is as low as possible, so you have almost like a cash reserve for your experimentation. There's a cost to privacy. There's a cost to making sure that you retain and grow your revenues. Both of those are what we call key performance indicators. Depends on what you want to achieve and what your strategy is set out to achieve. And on top of that, what problem are you solving for? I think if you're trying to solve for both customer privacy and for growing your revenues, you might get like a half-pregnant solution. Jacques also said that something similar a bit earlier. That crystal clear clarity on what problem I'm solving for, I think that must be the guiding principle. Don't solve for two problems. Solve for a single problem at a time.
Jacques, you earlier mentioned around money management, being able to guide a customer. And I think this speaks to Big Brothers watching. There are solutions that exist on the app that also make me cringe because I didn't know I swiped so much in certain places. How do we ensure then that there's a transparent exchange of information, right? I think with all of us, we tend to start with just a boilerplate, hey, we're collecting your information, Poppy allows us to, blah, 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 and it's whole terms and conditions. How do we ensure that there's a transparent exchange of information so that I know that this is the information that I'm giving my bank and this is what they're using it for and they're not using it for anything else?
I think what's very important here is almost like a concept of micro steps or tiny behaviors that you pick up in the customer's journey, that you start showing value in very specific ways. So let's say, for example, part of your onboarding process in the T's and C's, you would have accepted that we can start tracking your spend. As soon as you start spending in your groceries categories, we'll say, hey, we've seen you spend $500 at Pick n Pay. Do you maybe want to set a budget for that? Okay, and you might decide to ignore or do that. There's going to be times throughout your cycle that we're going to try and nudge you and give you some insights. Ultimately, at the end, if you haven't engaged with us and we've gone through enough cycles, we can then probably recommend more to you to say, we've actually consistently been tracing in the background, like you know, we've actually thought of a budget that we could recommend to you. Do you want to accept that, yes or no? The key thing here is that ultimately the customer needs to feel in control in terms of whether I want this or not. And it is for the benefit of the customer. If we're honest, sometimes things we do in banks are for the benefit of the bank because we all need to make revenue. Digital transformation at the end of the day for me is about creating value for the customer and for the bank at a level where it makes commercial sense and you can start doing things more radically. So it's this micro engagement with customers before there's this full bang. If they are uncomfortable with it, they need to be able to very easily switch it off and say, I don't want this. I think this is intrusive. Absolutely, they can be in control of that. But the micro steps for me is the thing to say, we're starting to do something. If you're not comfortable with it, stop it now. Thanks.
Sam?
Jack nailed it. Always giving a customer an option to say yes or no. It starts there. But I think we should also go back to the principle of what a bank is founded on. A bank is founded on a principle of trust. And if, as the bank, I start giving you advice on those little things, for starters, it means you're going to trust me with even bigger suggestions that I'm going to give in the future. And in so doing, I'm securing my business, but I'm also adding value to your daily lives.
Thank you very much. I don't think there's any other questions. And my gatekeeper is here to say, get off the stage now. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. We really, really appreciate it. Oh, there's another. Sorry, my gatekeeper, you left.
So I just need to advise the audience that it does sort of squash. I'm the last person who wants to interrupt a good energy in a conversation, but it is going to squash lunch a little bit. Please carry on.
Can't hear me?
There
we go. So I guess I'm the culprit to ruin lunch then. Hi, I'm Chaz.
Hi, Chaz.
I'm from fintech in Cape Town called Wonga. And so my question is around, you guys speak about creating a digital strategy which frames a company that's fit for purpose and in the position to create shared value for growth, right? Beautiful, love it. However, there was a quote mentioned from, I think, Peter Drucker, that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And in the world we're in at the moment, something that we are struggling with is the isolation that people go through. You spoke about psychological safety. With everyone in this remote work environment, that culture doesn't permeate. I know for myself how I learned to be a professional essentially was from sitting next to people, from seeing this is how you behave, this is how you interact, where cultures or companies are really just a group of people and cultures what guides their interactions, right? So I think I'm asking, how do you maintain that? How do you take that forward? How do you not just create a culture but build it going forward in the circumstances that we find ourselves in?
Jacques, I'm going to tag you first because, again, you are technically a neobank. How do we do this?
I fully understand what you're saying. I started in the job I've got now in the midst of COVID. I knew some of the people, but I literally met some of the staff probably a year later. It's flipping hard. It's really hard. You have to spend time together. I know it's not popular, people don't like going to the office, but I'm also over setting up 15-minute team meetings to ask you a question that I could have asked you if you sat next to me in the office. So FaceTime is important. The emotional sort of cues and body language people give you in person, you don't get on Teams. We've got our cameras on, we've got a principle where we like seeing each other. Unfortunately, we're geographically spread, but we try to get together as much as we can. The flip side is we all go to the office and then spend the whole day on Teams calls with people who are not in the office. so the challenge there is to then try and see if you can align that. So long story short, people have to spend time together, at least within your team. The culture component, it needs to be jointly owned. If people aren't physically with each other, the assumption is that I don't own it, everybody else does. And that's a serious problem, right? So I know people don't like hearing this, but going to the office is probably going to be good for your mental health as well, and good for your stress management, because you're not going to sit alone at home trying to get answers to stuff that you don't have, that you can ask someone in the office, or just say, I'm flipping stressed, I don't know what to do. Yeah, I may be giving you more than you asked for. As you can see, very passionate on this topic.
Louis, I'm definitely one of those people who will challenge going to the office. Because, you know, I can multitask. That's my excuse. But Louis, how do we build culture on the premise of FaceTime is important? How do we build culture and encourage organizations to invest in culture building, in the sense that it's not always just the office? We put team buildings on the back burner. We put conferences. We put lunch at work or lunch and learns sort of on the back burner, and we say we want progress, but we don't realize how putting those things on the back burner impacts progress. How do we encourage leadership to invest in culture building?
I think the first step is to understand what's the impact of remote work on job satisfaction, quality of problem solving. And I was reading some statistics just yesterday about the negative correlation between hybrid work and long-term sustainability of a culture, not short-term sustainability. That's for me the first step, is to understand what the data tells us about these things. How do we get organizations to design for that? I go back to my principle of you co-design that with your staff. Maybe you can't go back to pre-COVID levels, but there's got to be a point where we understand the human need for community. And the human need for community is physical presence around a common problem that we're trying to solve. There was a fantastic study done at Stanford University a few years ago around the impact of Zoom and Teams on your brain functionality and how different parts of your brain that should be highlighted when you solve problems are not because of the impact of technology. One of the outcomes of that study was that you should not have more than 4 by 1 hour team meetings per day. Many people have got more. So it's a complex thing, right? It's really a complex thing. So understand the consequences of where we are. But the most important thing is culture is about human connections. It's not about tech connections. It's human connections, face to face. We have a need for community. And that community can, in my view, only be achieved face to face. You can do your bride, do your office functions, co-design, set up a team, co-design for that.
Sam, Dithabeng, Kwana Lesotho, very far apart. When it's snowing and we want to build a culture, what are the opportunities that exist in different markets? So I think we sometimes take for granted how interconnected Johannesburg, as an example, is in comparison to Lesotho or Mpumalanga. What are the opportunities that exist in building the culture, in finding hybrid ways of building the culture?
So while we are already in the era of having virtual meetings and the likes, like Jacques and Louis have already said, physical contact is still the key. You know, if you're talking about culture, I think even COVID itself showed us that in as much as we were able, most of us, to work from home, I think for one, I must have taken months without going to the office, and I was still fine. But I also picked a certain pattern that I started not having working hours, you know. At any given time when I think of something, I would go and do it, whether it's night or day. So it started stealing some part of my time that I should be doing something else. Why? Because now I'm working from home, you know, and I have the liberty to do as I please with regards to managing my time and all that. So collaboration and making sure that people get together, even if it's those strategic sessions that you can set up boot camps and the likes, but there needs to be a component or an element of sharing ideas in a collaborative state, such that you can entrench that culture, you know. So in our case, yeah, we do go up the mountains and we'll just hide there, phones away, just doing strategy. And when you come out of that, we come back revived and, you know, ready to take the organization forward. So thanks.
Thank you very much. Chaz, you answered.
Yes, I'm hoping you tell me how to get James to come to the office.
Oh, no. Do you want them to Dev or do you want them to come to the office? Pick a struggle. I kid. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think we have any other questions from the floor. So I will give it back to my gatekeeper at this point, and I will thank you, gentlemen, again for your time, and really to the audience, thank you for your engagement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.